Erase negative thoughts from the mind. Stoic wisdom. There is a war inside you. Not the kind the world can see. Not the kind that leaves bruises on the skin. Not the kind people gather around and ask about. This war is quieter. It begins in the dark moments. When the room is silent. When the phone is down. When the laughter fades. When the world stops distracting you long enough for the mind to speak. And when it speaks, it does not always speak kindly. It reminds you of what went wrong. It replays the embarrassment. It sharpens the insult. It magnifies the rejection. It whispers the fear. It predicts the worst. It tells you what you lost. It tells you who left. It tells you that you are behind. It tells you that you are weak. It tells you that maybe you will never become who you hope to be, and because it sounds like your own voice. You believe it. That is the cruelest part. The enemy does not always come from outside. Sometimes it lives in your own thinking. Sometimes it wears the mask of memory. Sometimes it hides in anxiety. Sometimes it calls itself caution. Sometimes it pretends to be wisdom. But it is not wisdom. It is mental poison. Negative thoughts do not arrive like a storm you can see from miles away. They come like drops. Small, subtle, barely noticed. One thought, one fear, one comparison, one regret, one doubt, one replayed conversation, one imagined failure. And before you know it, the drops become a flood that drowns your peace, a flood that steals your focus, a flood that weakens your courage, a flood that convinces you life is heavier than it truly is. Most people never realize what is happening. They think the world is attacking them, when in truth, their interpretation of the world is what is torturing them. This is what the Stoics understood thousands of years ago. They understood that a person can be surrounded by comfort and still suffer. They understood that a person can be surrounded by difficulty and still remain calm. They understood that suffering is not always caused by events, but by the mind's relationship to those events. And if the mind can create a prison, the mind can also build a sanctuary. That is what this journey is about. Not suppressing your thoughts. Not pretending pain does not exist. Not becoming cold, not becoming emotionless. Not escaping reality. No, this is about learning how to look directly at the darkness inside the mind, and remove its power. This is about becoming the kind of person who can sit in the middle of fear and remain steady. The kind of person who can be insulted and not collapse. The kind of person who can fail and still move. The kind of person who can be alone without becoming haunted. The kind of person who can hear the voice of negativity, and answer it with truth. Because negative thoughts are not the final authority. They are not prophecy. They are not identity. They are not destiny. They are visitors. And visitors can be dismissed. But only if you know how. Tonight, we begin. Tonight, we strip the illusion from the thoughts that have ruled too many people for too long. Tonight, we walk through the ancient discipline that has helped men and women master inner chaos. Tonight, we learn how to erase negative thoughts from the mind, not by force, but by understanding. Not by panic, but by power, not by running, but by rising. So if your mind has been heavy, if your spirit has been tired, if you have smiled in public and suffered in silence, if you have fought battles nobody knows about, if your own thoughts have become your greatest burden, stay. Because by the end of this journey, you will not be the same person who started it. You will be calmer, stronger, clearer, harder to shake, harder to manipulate, harder to break, and most importantly, you will begin to understand a truth that changes everything. You do not control which thoughts knock at the door, but you absolutely control which ones are allowed to live in your house. This is how to erase negative thoughts from the mind. The trap that keeps millions of people imprisoned before they ever realize there is an exit. It is a simple lie. A common lie. A dangerous lie. The lie is this: if I think it, it must be true. And from that lie grows another: if I think it, it must be who I am. This is where suffering deepens. A person feels fear, and thinks, I am weak. A person feels anger, and thinks, I am broken. A person feels envy, and thinks, I am ugly inside. A person feels anxiety, and thinks, something is wrong with me. A person feels shame, and thinks, this is my identity. But the Stoics would stop you immediately. They would say, a thought is not a verdict. A thought is not a command. A thought is not your character. A thought is not your soul. A thought is an impression. And impressions must be examined. Imagine a stranger knocks at your door in the middle of the night. Would you immediately hand him the keys to your house? Would you say, come and sit in my chair, eat my food, rearrange my furniture, tell me how to live? Of course not. You would question him. Who are you? Why are you here? What do you want? Do you belong in this home? Yet every day, people do the opposite with their thoughts. A thought appears, you are not good enough, and they open the door. Another thought appears, you always fail, and they offer it a seat. Another thought appears, nobody truly cares about you, and they let it sleep in the house. Another thought appears, it's too late for you, and suddenly the thought is no longer a visitor. It becomes a tenant, then a roommate, then a ruler. This is how the mind becomes occupied territory. Not because the thoughts were strong, but because they were never challenged. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote to himself again and again about the need to guard the mind. He understood that the mind is like a fortress. It can be breached from within if the gatekeeper is careless. And the gatekeeper is awareness. The first step to erasing negative thoughts is not to destroy them. It is to separate from them. You must learn to say, this is a thought, not a fact. This is an impression, not a prophecy. This is a feeling, not an identity. This is a mental event, not my essence. That single shift changes everything. Because the moment you stop saying I am negative, and start saying I am noticing a negative thought, you create distance. And distance is power. Without distance, thoughts feel like chains. With distance, thoughts become objects you can inspect. Picture a man standing in the middle of a storm. The wind is violent. The rain is cold. The thunder shakes the sky. If he believes he is the storm, he panics. But if he realizes he is simply standing within the storm, he can endure. That is the difference. You are not the storm in your mind. You are the one witnessing it. This is why many people stay trapped. They merge with every emotion. They become whatever passes through them. If anger comes, they become anger. If fear comes, they become fear. If sadness comes, they become sadness. If insecurity comes, they become insecurity. But the wise become observers first, not because they do not feel, but because they refuse to drown in what they feel. This is not detachment in the cold sense. This is disciplined awareness. The Stoic does not say, I will never feel pain. The Stoic says, pain may visit me, but it will not own me. The Stoic does not say, I will never have dark thoughts. The Stoic says, dark thoughts may knock, but they will not govern my life. And this matters more than most people realize, because negative thoughts often gain their power from speed. They come fast. They hit hard. They demand immediate belief. You fail once, and the mind instantly says, you're a failure. Someone ignores your message, and the mind instantly says, you are unwanted. You make a mistake, and the mind instantly says, you ruin everything. That speed is the weapon. It does not give you time to question. It wants you to accept the thought before reason arrives. So the first discipline is to slow it down. When a negative thought appears, do not merge with it, do not bow to it, do not panic over it, pause. Then ask, what exactly am I thinking right now? Is this thought objectively true? What evidence supports it? What evidence challenges it? Is this a fact, or is this fear speaking? Would I say this to someone I love? Is this thought helping me act wisely, or merely hurting me? These questions are not small. They are weapons, because negativity thrives in vagueness. A vague fear feels enormous. A named fear becomes manageable. A vague thought says, everything is going wrong, but once you force it into the light, it weakens. What exactly is going wrong? Everything, or one thing: the job, the relationship, the money, the timing, the expectation. When you become precise, the monster shrinks. This is one of the oldest mental disciplines in philosophy. Chaos feels powerful until you give it language. Many people suffer because they never stop to define what is happening inside them. They simply feel the heaviness and call it reality. But heaviness is not always reality. Sometimes it is unexamined interpretation. A person wakes up feeling anxious and says, today will be terrible. But what happened? Nothing yet. The day has not even begun. The mind created a story before reality had a chance to speak. This is what negative thinking does. It writes endings before events unfold. It predicts disaster. It assumes rejection. It exaggerates discomfort. It confuses uncertainty with doom. And if left unchecked, it becomes habit. That is the next truth you must understand. Negative thoughts are often not deep truths. They are repeated mental habits. Habits can feel personal because they are familiar. But familiarity is not truth. If you have spent years thinking, I'm behind, I'm not enough, nothing works for me, people always leave, I always mess things up, then those thoughts may feel like reality simply because they are rehearsed. But repetition does not make a lie true. If a person hears the same insult every day for 10 years, the insult becomes easier to believe. That does not make it accurate. It makes it conditioned. And what is conditioned can be reconditioned. This is where hope begins. You do not need to win a battle against every negative thought today. You need to stop worshipping them. You need to stop treating every inner whisper like sacred truth. You need to become skeptical of the mind when it speaks from fear. Not cynical, not numb, not disconnected, just discerning. Imagine a courtroom. A thought enters and says, this person is worthless. In the old version of you, the judge immediately agrees. Case closed. But in the new version of you, the thought must present evidence. And even then, it will be cross-examined. Who says this? What is the basis? Is there proof? Is this a distortion? Is this a temporary emotion pretending to be permanent truth? Now the thought is on trial. Not you. That is the reversal. For too long, many people have put themselves on trial and let their worst thoughts act as judge, jury, and executioner. No more. From this moment on, your thoughts answer to your reason. This does not mean you will instantly become peaceful. It means you will stop being helpless. And that is the beginning of mental freedom. There is a story, old in spirit if not in exact form, of a man who carried a sack of black stones. Every day, whenever he had a painful thought, he placed a black stone in the sack. At first, he believed the stones represented his reality. He believed the weight proved how terrible his life was. But one day, an old teacher asked him, Why do you only collect the black stones? The man looked confused. The teacher said, every time you act with courage, where is that stone? Every time you endure pain, where is that stone? Every time you resist temptation, where is that stone? Every time you survive what you thought would destroy you, where is that stone? The man had no answer. Because like many people, he had become an archivist of pain, and a stranger to his own strength. Negative thoughts do the same thing. They build a private museum of every failure, every humiliation, every regret, every wound. And they walk you through it again and again as if that is all you are. But that is not all you are. You are also the time you kept going, the time you held yourself together, the time you endured rejection, the time you learned, the time you rose, the time you changed, the time you survived. The mind that only counts darkness is dishonest. And part of erasing negative thoughts is refusing to let the mind become a dishonest narrator. Not every story your mind tells deserves to be believed. Some stories are fear dressed as logic. Some are pain dressed as identity. Some are old wounds trying to become your future. Your task is not to hate the mind. Your task is to train it. The same mind that can torment you can also protect you. The same mind that can poison your day can also strengthen your life. The same inner voice that now attacks you can become a disciplined companion. But first, you must stop confusing thought with self. Say it clearly. I have thoughts. I am not my thoughts. Again, I experience negativity. I am not negativity. Again, a dark thought can pass through me without becoming me. That is where the prison cracks. And once it cracks, light begins to enter. If negative thoughts hurt us so much, why does the mind keep producing them? Why does it replay embarrassment more than success? Why does it remember rejection more than praise? Why does it predict danger faster than possibility? Why does it return to pain even when pain has already passed? Because the mind was not built first for peace. It was built for survival. Long before modern life, before glowing screens and constant comparison, before deadlines and online judgment, the human nervous system had one primary job: stay alive. And to stay alive, the mind learned something brutal but useful. It learned to scan for threat. The rustling in the bushes could be the wind. Or it could be a predator. The strange sound at night could be nothing. Or it could mean death. The person who seemed untrustworthy could be harmless, or could betray the tribe. So the mind evolved to pay extra attention to what might go wrong. This kept our ancestors alive. But in modern life, that same mechanism often becomes psychological sabotage. Now the predators are different. A text not answered, a delayed opportunity, a critical comment, a failed plan, a social comparison, a financial fear, a painful memory, a future uncertainty, and the old brain reacts as if survival is at stake. That is why your mind can turn a small issue into a massive internal crisis. Not because you are weak. Not because you are cursed. But because the survival brain is loud. Yet here is the problem. What protects the body can disturb the soul. The Stoics understood this in their own language. They knew human beings are prone to impressions. Quick, emotional, instinctive reactions to events. But they also knew that wisdom begins when reason examines those impressions. The first reaction may not be your fault. The second reaction is your responsibility. Fear may arise. That is human. But whether you feed it, worship it, obey it, and build your life around it, that is where discipline enters. This is why negative thoughts often feel automatic. Because they are. The first spark is often automatic. But the fire is often fed by repetition. One thought becomes 10. 10 become a mood. The mood becomes a lens. The lens becomes a worldview. And then people say, this is just how I am. No, that is just how you have been trained. There is a difference, and anything trained can be retrained. There is a moment, small, almost invisible, when a negative thought first enters. That moment matters more than most people realize. Because in that tiny moment, before the story expands, before the emotion deepens, before the body tightens, before the spiral begins, you still have power. But most people miss that moment. They do not notice the first sentence. They only notice the emotional avalanche that follows. For example, a simple thought appears. They haven't replied. Then instantly, maybe they're upset. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they don't respect me. Maybe people always lose interest in me. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I ruin relationships. Maybe I'll always be alone. Notice what happened. One neutral event, one missing reply, and the mind built an empire of suffering from it. This is why the Stoic interruption is so powerful. The Stoic interruption says, catch the first lie, not the 50th thought, the first distortion, because once the mind builds momentum, it becomes harder to stop. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like this. The thought appears, I'm going to fail. You interrupt. That is a prediction, not a fact. The thought appears, they don't value me. You interrupt. I do not know that yet. The thought appears, this pain will never end. You interrupt. I have felt this before, and it passed. The thought appears, I always ruin things. You interrupt. Always is an exaggeration. Be honest. The thought appears, I'm not enough. You interrupt. According to what standard? And whose voice is this? That is mental mastery, not the absence of negativity, but the refusal to let it spread unchallenged. One of the most powerful ways to weaken a negative thought is to name it. Because unnamed darkness feels infinite, but named darkness becomes specific. And what is specific can be handled. When a thought appears, ask, what kind of thought is this? Is it fear, shame, catastrophizing, comparison, old memory, self-hatred, rejection, sensitivity, perfectionism, impatience, need for control? Most people say, I feel bad. But bad is too vague. Bad keeps you powerless. Precision gives you leverage. For example, instead of saying, I'm overwhelmed, say, I am catastrophizing about the future. Instead of saying, I feel terrible, say, I am replaying shame from the past. Instead of saying, I hate myself today, say, I am measuring myself against unrealistic perfection. Now the fog clears. Now you can address the real issue. The first battle is not against the whole mind. It is against confusion. It is against unconscious belief. It is against the habit of accepting every dark thought as truth. It is against the old reflex that says, if I feel it, it must define me. No, from this day forward. You begin to see clearly. You are not every thought that visits you. You are the witness. You are the gatekeeper. You are the judge. You are the one who decides what stays. And that changes everything, because once you understand that negative thoughts are not masters, you are finally ready to learn the next level. How to starve them. How to cut off the fuel they feed on. How to stop giving power to memories, fear, comparison, and inner chaos. That is where true freedom begins. There is a dangerous misunderstanding that keeps many people trapped. They think negative thoughts are powerful because they arrive. But that is not the real reason. Negative thoughts are powerful because they are fed. That is the truth most people never learn. A dark thought can enter the mind like a spark. Small, brief, barely noticeable. But if that spark lands in dry grass, if it lands in fear, in unhealed memory, in overthinking, in comparison, in self-doubt, then it does not remain a spark. It becomes a fire. And the tragedy is this. Most people spend years trying to fight the fire, without ever asking why the fire keeps finding fuel. They curse the anxiety. They curse the sadness. They curse the overthinking. They curse the intrusive memories. They curse the inner voice that seems determined to make peace impossible. But the Stoics would say, do not only study the flame, study the wood, because if you remove the fuel, the fire dies. And that is where true mental mastery begins. Not in emotional suppression, not in pretending you are never affected, not in smiling while your soul is collapsing, but in learning how to stop feeding what is hurting you. That is what most people never understand. A negative thought alone is not always the problem. The real problem is what happens next. Do you repeat it? Do you decorate it? Do you dramatize it? Do you add fear to it? Do you attach memory to it? Do you compare your life to others? Do you turn one moment into an identity? Because that is how a passing shadow becomes a permanent night. And if you are going to erase negative thoughts from the mind, you must learn this law. What you repeatedly feed, you strengthen. What you repeatedly starve, you weaken. That law applies to everything. Fear, confidence, resentment, peace, self-hatred, discipline, hope, inner stability. Your mind becomes what you rehearse, not what you wish for. Not what you post about, not what you say you want, what you rehearse. So if you rehearse failure, humiliation, regret, revenge, rejection, worst-case scenarios, comparisons, self-condemnation, then those pathways grow stronger. And eventually, negativity starts to feel natural. But it is not natural. It is trained. And what is trained can be retrained. That is the hope hidden inside this struggle. You are not doomed to remain the person who spirals at midnight. You are not condemned to be ruled by overthinking. You are not fated to spend every quiet moment at war with your own mind. But to become free, you must become ruthless with what you feed, if you want to truly erase negative thought patterns. You need a system, not just inspiration, not just mood, not just random bursts of motivation. A repeatable system. Here is a powerful Stoic method. Step 1. Catch the thought. You cannot replace what you do not notice. The first discipline is awareness. When a dark thought appears, pause and identify it clearly. Examples. I'm catastrophizing. I'm assuming rejection. I'm replaying shame. I'm predicting failure. I'm comparing again. I'm speaking to myself harshly. Naming it weakens it. Because once it is named, it becomes an object of observation, not an invisible force controlling you. Step 2. Strip the exaggeration. Negative thoughts often use dramatic language. Words like always, never, everyone, nobody, ruined, impossible, hopeless, forever. These words create emotional distortion. So ask, is this literally true? Is this an exaggeration? Am I turning one event into a permanent identity? Am I making a prediction without evidence? For example, I always fail, becomes, I failed in this instance. Nobody respects me, becomes, one interaction triggered insecurity. My life is ruined, becomes, something painful happened, and now I must respond wisely. This step is powerful because exaggeration is often the emotional fuel. Remove the exaggeration, and the thought loses force. Step 3. Replace with a stronger truth. Now you do not insert fantasy. You insert a more useful, reality-based, strength-building truth. Examples. I can't handle this. Right pointing arrow. This is difficult, but difficulty is not incapacity. I'm too broken. Right pointing arrow. I am wounded in places, but still capable of discipline. I'm behind in life. Right pointing arrow. My timeline is not a moral failure. My duty is to keep moving. This feeling controls me. Right pointing arrow. Feelings influence me, but they do not command me. I'll never change. Right pointing arrow. Change is slow, but every repetition matters. That is the new script. Step 4. Return to action immediately. This is where most people fail. They think replacing the thought is enough. It is not. You must pair the new thought with behavior. Because action seals the lesson. If you say, I can handle this, then do the next small task. If you say, I am not powerless, then stand up, write the message, make the call, take the walk, clean the room, begin the work, breathe deeply, or leave the environment that feeds the spiral. Why? Because the body believes what it practices. Thought without action can remain abstract. Thought plus action becomes evidence. That evidence becomes confidence. And confidence is not built from speeches. It is built from repeated proof. Most people do not realize how much the first hour of the day shapes the mind. The first thoughts matter. The first inputs matter. The first emotional direction matters. If you wake up and immediately check comparison, check bad news, check rejection, check chaos, check noise, check what other people are doing, check what you are lacking, you hand your mind away before you have even met yourself. And then you wonder why the day feels heavy. The Stoics would never begin the day like that. They understood that the morning is a threshold, a gate, and if you do not guard the gate, anything can enter. This is why you need a morning mind training ritual. Not complicated, not performative, disciplined. A Stoic morning routine for negative thought control. 1. Sit in silence before consuming the world. For a few minutes, do not touch your phone. Do not let external voices speak before your own mind is grounded. Ask, what kind of person do I choose to be today? What is my duty today? What can go wrong today? And how will I respond with dignity? What is in my control right now? This prepares the mind for reality instead of fantasy. 2. Expect difficulty without fear. The Stoics practiced premeditation of adversity, not to become pessimistic, but to become prepared. Say, today I may face delay, disrespect, uncertainty, inconvenience, temptation, disappointment, or misunderstanding. None of these can force me to abandon my character. This is powerful, because the mind that expects some negative thought control. 1. Sit in silence before consuming the world. For a few minutes, do not touch your phone. Do not let external voices speak before your own mind is grounded. Ask, what kind of person do I choose to be today? What is my duty today? What can go wrong today? And how will I respond with dignity? What is in That is when the inner world changes. But there is still a deeper enemy ahead. Because even after you learn to replace negative thoughts, there are hidden triggers in your environment, your habits, your routines, and your emotional wounds that can silently reopen the door. And if you do not identify them, the mind will keep slipping back into old darkness. Most people think negative thoughts begin in the mind. But that is only half the truth. Yes, the mind creates stories. Yes, the mind exaggerates. Yes, the mind replays pain. Yes, the mind can become its own enemy. But there is something else. There is the world around you. The room you wake up in, the noise you consume. The people you tolerate. The conversations you repeat. The habits you normalize. Remember this. A strong mind is not a mind with no dark thoughts. A strong mind is a mind that refuses to kneel before them. So if you have stayed with me until this moment, I want you to make a promise to yourself today. You will stop feeding what destroys you. You will stop entertaining what weakens you. You will stop identifying with fear, doubt, and mental chaos. And instead, you will protect your peace, train your mind, guard your energy, and become the kind of person whose inner world cannot be conquered. Because the moment you master your thoughts, you begin to master your life. If this message spoke to your soul, then this video was meant for you. Comment below, I control my mind. Write it with conviction. Write it as a declaration. Write it as the beginning of your transformation. And if you're ready to build a mind that cannot be broken, make sure you subscribe to Stoic Wisdom. Because here, we do not escape life's battles. We become strong enough to win them. Until next time, stay silent, stay disciplined, stay dangerous, and never let a passing thought control a permanent soul.